Hello and welcome back to After Whistle Sports. I'm joined by Jonathan Litzkin again. For I think this is our first because we missed last week. This is our first game day preview, weekly recaps. Again, we'll probably still at least me and Jack will probably still go more in depth with our conference overviews because we are a little bit behind on that too. But I'm excited to have you on and. Thanks for finding the time we can do this before the
Yeah,
game.
thanks for having me again, Dylan.
Yeah, so let's just start with what happened last week. We're recording this right now on Tuesday. We have games for week one officially starting on Thursday, but we had some interesting week zero outcomes. Probably the most interesting, and I know that we have some Husker fans that listen to this. So unfortunately, we do have to spend some time talking about Scott Frost's um, I'm not going to say blunder because I mean this is to be expected at this point from him, but Nebraska losing to Northwestern in Ireland in pretty terrible fashion, questionable decisions, really poor second half play. Oh, John, what is the preferred outcome, I guess, for the rest of the season, or like the outlook
Well,
for Scott Frost in Nebraska?
I still feel like every game that they play on their schedule is a winnable game just because of how Nebraska has played football for the last 2 years and really since Scott Frost has gotten to Nebraska. But like that October 1st date where Scott Frost buyout dropped from 15 million to 7.5 million, it seems like almost just a waiting game at this point. They have North Dakota this week. Oklahoma week 3, some key Big Ten games obviously after that, and their schedule gets really hard late in the year. But after Saturday, it feels like what little hope the Nebraska fans have left for Scott Frost just completely disappeared. That like Northwestern did play much better than I think most people thought they were going to, and they looked much like a much better team, specifically on the offensive and defensive line than we thought. But like if you're Nebraska, you can't get beat up front like that. Like that's supposed to be like one of your strengths, and they just got bullied on both sides of the line.
Yeah, I'll start my Nebraska monologue because I was saying it, I think I mentioned it over the offseason a little bit that I actually really liked Nebraska on paper.
Mm-hmm.
They have a solid roster. I like Casey Thompson. I think Casey Thompson was pretty good.
Yeah,
Um, I thought the new OC Mark Whipple was also pretty solid in the first half. Now in the second half there are other problems with the offense, but in the first half, that team, I mean, they looked good, and I was really impressed with what the offense was, the high tempo, like it was like a mini air raid almost, and they seemed to be getting whatever they wanted.
yeah.
Now, the game changed for me, and of course, this is the big controversy, but it was the onside kick in the third quarter when Nebraska was up by 11. Scott Frost said after the game that that was his decision. Like that's not on the new special teams coach that they hired, which they didn't have in past years, which is crazy to say out loud. But uh, new special teams coach didn't make the call. That was Scott Frost, and you said that it seems like Nebraska can win every game on their schedule.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost gonna take the opposite approach. It seems like Nebraska can lose every game they play.
That's also true.
Time
It
they
does
step
go
on
both
the field.
ways.
Yeah, every time they step on the field, it feels like how are they going to put themselves in a position to maybe lose this game? And to me, that's a reflection on nobody else but Coach Scott Frost. I mean, we've seen it year in, year out. He's changed coordinators, he's changed quarterbacks. What has been the constant? It's been
Scott
Dave,
Frost.
Scott Frost. Yeah. I've personally thought that he needed to win a bowl game this year um,
Yeah,
to
I
even
mean,
keep his job. To like, if he doesn't win 6 games this year, he is gone. Like he is beyond gone. Uh,
I'm yeah, I'm not entirely sure he's going to get through 6 games at this rate, but
yeah, I still think that they can win 6 games. I just think the nature of the Big Ten West this year is that these teams are gonna be beating each other up, and so I think he can win 6 games.
mhm.
But let's just go back and think about what that means. Like at this point in year 4 of Scott Frost, is that really the bar they want to be at? And like I feel like we keep lowering the bar every year, and he keeps losing worse games, and so we keep
Yeah,
lowering it even more. Like, what if they don't fire him? Is next year going to be winning 5 games? Like, what is the correct way to look at him, and what's the leash that they should give him? Because I think there are good coaches that can win games at Nebraska. Like this isn't like they're in the Big Ten East. They're not Maryland. They're not
right.
Rutgers.
Yeah,
Okay, they're not in the SEC West. Like, or they're not even in like one of the, I think, the Coastal ACC Coastal. Like I would argue that's even a better division than the Big Ten West. But
mhm,
this is a division where you can win 7 or 8 games, and you have the
absolutely.
resources. And they've stacked top 25 recruiting classes. I think almost every year Scott Frost has been there, they've had top 30, top 35 recruiting classes, which
Yeah,
again, that's good enough to win games. And to lose to a still, I think that Northwestern's a far um, weaker team than Nebraska, but it's just bad. And I think it's due to coaching. I think it's due to the state of the program and the culture that's been set by Scott Frost. I don't want to rag too much on Nebraska fans because, I mean, again, they have to watch the games each week.
mhm,
But Scott Frost is on the hottest seat in college
yeah,
football right now.
yeah. I mean, if he's not number one on the hot seat, then who is? But like, just to not to try to intentionally throw gasoline on the fire, but like, this is a Northwestern team that we say that stat at the beginning of the season about the point differential, right? How Nebraska outscored opponents last year, even though they went 3-9. The reason they did that was in large part because they beat this Northwestern team by 40, and now they come out week 0 and in Europe and lose to them. Like we've reached a point of no return, in my opinion.
Yeah, the excuses to me seem to be running out. If it was up to me, I would have not let Scott Frost get on the plane back to the United States. I would have like
Yeah.
deported him right back there. Like
Oh,
he can lead some like second level Irish soccer team to like a 3-12 record, but like don't come back to Nebraska.
and now they got to turn around and play a solid FCS team this week. So like
Yeah.
it's not a cakewalk.
Yep. Let's go on. I just want to ask if you have any takeaways from some of the other games. I just wanted to mention that there are some really bad teams in the Group of Five level this year. That was my
Yeah,
main
there
takeaway.
really are. And so I was following all the games throughout the day just because like it's week 0 and like it's the first week of college football. I was excited. So one game I actually watched pretty extensively because I bet on it was Illinois Wyoming. And I actually like Wyoming, don't get me wrong, is a really bad team, but Illinois fans can't take for granted what they did. They looked pretty good. And I know Isaiah Williams got hurt and was just cramping. He avoided a major injury there, but it looks like Illinois is probably going to be able to run the ball at least a little, and their pass defense should probably keep them in some games against better teams. So
Yeah, I agree. I really liked Illinois. One of the more like technical aspects that I noticed when I was watching this game is how well the blocking was from every position. Like tight ends were great, offensive line was really good, but the wide receivers did a great job of setting the edge and being able to match the physicality on the perimeter, which was something that like I was expecting to see a little bit more last year from this team. That's like the classic Brett Bielema style is like he
yeah,
wants physicality at every position. So I was surprised to see like I'm not surprised. I was pleasantly surprised to see how well they played up front. Wyoming is terrible.
they're a really bad team.
I think their quarterback went what like 5 for 20 in the first half or something.
Yeah, they had like 60 passing yards or something horrendous like that.
Yeah,
But
no, they're terrible.
yeah, the one thing that I noticed this weekend, and it wasn't just Wyoming. It was the fact that Utah State was let UConn hang around, and it was Nevada letting New Mexico State hang around. The Mountain West, the gap between the top 4 teams in that conference and the rest of the conference is going to be large. Like you're going to see Fresno State, Air Force,
San Diego State,
San
yeah.
Diego State, and Boise State win some games by like 40 in that league.
Oh yeah, Nevada. I'm sorry, but like that was once a respectable football location.
Mhm.
They were really, really bad. I'll just leave it at that. They were
Yeah,
terrible.
that was
Um,
not good.
One last thing I wanted to touch on because I thought this was really funny, but Vanderbilt
Mhm.
absolutely demolished Hawaii on the Big Island. They won, I think, 63-10.
Yeah,
Just a alert here: Hawaii plays Michigan. I
yeah, in
think
2 weeks.
week
It'll,
two.
it'll be JJ McCarthy's game.
Michigan might hit triple digits. Um,
Yeah, no, for real.
No, like
But
actually though, especially with we'll talk about this later because I thought you might want to talk about this as well. But the quarterback situation where Michigan's starting Cade and then JJ, that gives an extra incentive for the quarterback who's playing to really run up the score. I feel
mhm.
like so this could be a dangerous one. Let's move on to Thursday's games, and the way I want to do this is maybe go through some of these, give our picks, predictions, maybe go give a spread prediction or gambling advice. But again, as the listeners know, we do this every week, and we've been pretty solid some weeks. But again, like we've also went like we went like 3 for 20 on some of them. So do not please take these with some uh, of that in mind that we're usually pretty solid, but
Mhm.
we can make some mistakes. But Central Michigan, Oklahoma State. I feel like it was what 6 years ago that, or maybe less, that Central Michigan went
Hail Mary
upset
game.
on the Hail Mary on Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
Do you see any of that happening this year?
So Central Michigan's actually a team that I got to see play last year because they played week one at Mizzou. They're not awful. The problem, they lost a lot of offensive linemen, which
Mhm.
could be pretty key against an Oklahoma State defense that's lining up Brock Martin and Colin Oliver opposite sides of that line. I don't think Oklahoma State is going to score very much at all, like at all this year. Losing Tay Martin, a guy who had 120 targets last year, is a lot to replace. And then, of course, they lost Jalen Warren, their stud running back too. I would lean Central Michigan on the points here. 21 and a half, I think, is a lot in week one, especially for a Central Michigan team that was overall pretty solid, one of the better MAC teams last year.
Yeah, I actually like that one too. Central Michigan actually they do a nice job of fielding just solid teams year in, year out.
Yeah.
Um, they have a very good system that they run. It's kind of like, I mean, you know what you're going to get when you play Central Michigan. Now,
Yeah.
from Oklahoma State standpoint, and I mentioned this when I talked with Jack on our Big 12 overview, but we were both really high on Oklahoma State. I think my main reason was that their defense should again be really good. And so I think, let's see, I'm interested to see what their offense looks like with kind of like the new guys they have at wideout. But I think this is going to be one of the like slower games to start off with. I think it's going to be defensive battle most of the time, and then Oklahoma State's going to end up winning by like 14 or 17.
Yeah, I think this is probably a game that maybe if you're a two TV person on Thursday night, this is probably on your second TV at least to start the night.
Yep. Let's move on to probably the game I'm most excited for that night is West
Mhm.
Virginia Pitt.
Yeah,
Bringing back the backyard brawl.
yeah,
It's
I love it. Like Pitt's sold out their stadium. It was like the first time ever that they sold out a game for a Pitt game.
yeah. Again, I'm going to start off with first of all, the line is Pitt minus 7.5. And
Hmm.
um, if you listen to our Big 12 preview, you heard that both Jack and I were very, very low on West Virginia. I think I had West Virginia as like maybe the worst team besides Kansas in the Big 12 coming into the season. Uh, and I'm going to kind of stick with that logic here. I think Pittsburgh is still a good enough offense, even with the loss of Mark Whipple and Kenny Pickett, to put up a ton of points on West Virginia, whose defense was pretty solid a few years ago, but like again last year they weren't very good, and they didn't add very much to their defense. I don't know. Do I trust JT Daniels? Not too much. It's funny though because the JT Daniels Keaton Slovis matchup. So it's basically the ex USC game. I like Pitt minus 7.5. I think West Virginia just doesn't have enough gas in the tank to keep up with Pitt.
Yeah, I usually try to put one teaser down every week, and this game is the first part of my teaser. I teased Pitt down to I think -1 when it was at 7, but I'm with you. I don't think this West Virginia team is really good. I keep hearing people say that JT Daniels just needs a chance, but he's now gotten beat out by Keaton Slovis and Stetson Bennett, so there's that aspect to it. I think Dante Stills is maybe the only good player on this West Virginia defense, so Pitt running the ball might not be great because he'll be clogging up some lanes, but Pitt will probably be more pass heavy anyway.
Yeah.
And I think this Pitt defense is also vastly improved. So even with taking a step back at the quarterback position and your weapons, I think this Pitt team is still a very solid team. And I'm with you. I think 7.5, Pitt -7.5 is probably the play here if you're going to bet it.
Yeah, I also just want to talk a little bit more about Pitt in general. Like I think that they're being a little bit overlooked early in the season, and I think people are putting too much emphasis on the loss of Kenny Pickett and Mark Whipple. This
Yeah.
team is still really, really talented. Like people don't understand that. Basically, they thought like last year, oh, that was just like the Kenny Pickett magic. That was a one-off year in a bad ACC. But Pitt really did a nice job of recruiting solid guys and then developing that talent. Pat Narduzzi's done one of the better jobs in the ACC in terms of turning a program into what it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned it, but the defense is really old, a ton of redshirt seniors, and a ton of guys who had playing time from last year. So it should be a really, really solid unit. And then Keaton Slovis, I'm personally a pretty big Keaton Slovis fan. I thought that he wasn't given the right opportunity in USC, and I think he can, in like the right team, which I think Pitt has in terms of weapons around him, I think he could have a really solid season.
He also is now leaving playing for Clay Helton and instead playing for Pat Narduzzi. And Pat Narduzzi has actually a pretty good record of quarterbacks now with Nathan Peterman, Kenny Pickett, whereas Clay Helton's quarterback just continuously got worse throughout their tenure playing under him.
Let's go to one last game on the Thursday night slate. We have Penn State at Purdue. Penn State is opening at a 3.5 road favorite.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want?
I'm on Penn State in this. This is one I actually bet, and I get that Purdue's probably the trendy upset pick here, but the way I've been describing it to people is that there are 22 players that play on a football field between offense and defense, obviously, like at one time, and Penn State is better at 21 of those positions, which with the one being the quarterback. Like, could Aiden O'Connell win this game for Purdue? Absolutely, but I think Penn State's a team that's getting really overlooked at the start of the year. I think they're a solid 9-3, 8-4 team with a hard schedule, and I think they're going to have a top 10 defense in not just in the country, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's time to reflect on who Aiden O'Connell is as a quarterback, because I think what happened was
Mm-hmm.
they won a lot of games and they beat Michigan State, and they won some games they shouldn't have, and they put up pretty crazy numbers compared to other Big Ten teams. Like that's the asterisk, okay?
Yeah.
And then all throughout the offseason, you hear, oh, Aiden O'Connell this, second best quarterback in the Big Ten. He does all this. And people just seem to just believe that at this point. They're like, oh, Aiden O'Connell, top tier quarterback. I I don't see it. No, I'm not trying to hate on Purdue. All I'm saying was Aiden O'Connell got a lot of help from the fact that they needed to throw the ball like 50 times a game last year. Okay, so while he put up really good yardage numbers and good yards per play numbers, that was like their offense. Like they needed to do that. And then if you look at Purdue against the top tier defenses from last year, you look at them against like Ohio State, it tells a little bit of a different story. Like they put up crazy numbers against a lot of the bad teams, like Michigan State in terms of defense. They're like the worst pass defense in the country last year.
Yeah, they were the most thrown against team in the Power 5 last year.
and then he struggled a little bit more when it came to playing some of the better defenses. So while I'm not saying that Aiden O'Connell is not a really good quarterback, I'm just saying that people need to kind of realize what he is and think about him in the context of Purdue football this year. With that being said, I really think Penn State's going to go out and beat Purdue by a solid margin on the road.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think that if I just jump in here, I think
yeah.
that people the reason you kind of get these Aiden O'Connell narratives is because there were three times where Purdue was kind of in the national spotlight and like expected to maybe pull an upset. All three times they did. It was Iowa, Michigan State, and then the bowl game against Tennessee. And let me just go out and say that Michigan State, and Tennessee's pass defenses were horrific. They
Like,
were
like the worst. They were
they
like
were
bottom 2% in the country. Like they were terrible.
terrible last year. And Penn State is not only going to have a good pass defense, they're going to get to the quarterback too. So he's not have a ton of time to throw the ball. You throw that on top of the fact that Purdue lost the best defensive player in maybe like the history of their school, and like Karlaftis like would single-handedly like get them off the field on drives. They don't have that anymore, nor do they have David Bell. So I think this Purdue team is probably the fourth best team in the West still, and I think you'll see that on Thursday night.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the weapons that Purdue is bringing in. I mean, they brought in transfer Charlie Jones from Iowa, who's like,
Yeah, he's a punt returner.
yeah,
Like
he was the
he's
punt return guy. I heard that like he's gonna get some run at like X receiver, but we'll see a little bit about that. But
hmm,
Penn State is going to be a much improved football team. Their defense is going to be very good.
yeah.
Manny Diaz is the new head man of the defense. We'll see how that turns out. I mean, Manny Diaz gets a bad rap for his head coaching job, but
He
I mean,
was a good DC.
he was a good coordinator. Yeah.
Hmm,
One of the guys I'm really excited about seeing is Mitchell Tinsley,
yeah,
transfer from I believe Western Kentucky. He was on like those Bailey Zappi teams.
yeah.
Uh, but I mean, apparently he's been really electric in practice so far. And then, yeah, I mean, the offensive line, listen, like the offensive line for Penn State is going to be like every other Penn State offensive line under James Franklin, like
Hmm,
pretty mediocre to not good.
yeah.
But they have enough guys around them, and their defense is good enough to win a lot of games, and especially win games against teams that aren't going to be a force on defense. So, like, Penn State's not going to have the pass rush, or Purdue's not going to have the pass rush to be able to disrupt what Penn State wants to do. So,
Yeah.
I got
I
Penn
also
State
think,
easily over that, covering the 3.5.
yeah, I also think Penn State's much more talented in their backfield this year. And like, replacing Dotson's not easy, but like bringing in a guy in Mitchell Tinsley who had 1,400 yards and 14 touchdowns last year and 87 catches, like that's just about as good as you can get.
Yep. Let's go to the main games on Saturday. There's a game on Friday. We can talk about it a little bit. Ooh, what do you feel about Illinois, Indiana? Indiana is
So
currently a 3-point favorite.
yeah, that line has come down from 5 to like 3. I want to say since Saturday, and like that's just natural line movement because Illinois looked good. I'm hesitant to bet on Illinois, even though I think they're the better team in this one, just because they have to turn around and now play a conference road game after playing in week 0, and Indiana will be, I guess, more fresh. But I don't know if Indiana's named a starting quarterback between Tuttle and Basilak yet, but both
I
of them
think
are
it's going to be Tuttle.
both of them are just dreadful. So, and then of course you bring in Sean Shivers from Auburn, but yeah, this Indiana team I expect to be the worst in the Big Ten, and I've kind of been saying that all off season. I think Illinois is the better team, but I would be hesitant to bet this one just because of where the line's at.
Yeah, I'm staying really far away from this line. This
Mm,
game is just like this. This game could go either three ways. I feel like okay. First way is that Illinois is just much better in the
yeah.
trenches. They dominate the run game. Indiana throws 3 interceptions, and that's the game. Okay.
Mhm.
Or you can have the game where Illinois is fatigued from the game last week. Indiana's better than we expect, and it ends up being a really close game. and Indiana maybe ends up winning at the end. Some craziness happens. Or, which I think is the most likely scenario, is that both Illinois and Indiana look really, really bad. And this game ends up 21-17. And I don't even care who wins. It'll be one or the other. But I feel like that's the most likely scenario.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
All right, let's move on to some of the more interesting matchups on Saturday. Let's start a little bit smaller with um, some of the. Let's do this. Let's do Rutgers Boston College. A little bit of an interesting East Coast matchup. Boston College favored by 7 points.
This is an interesting one for me because the whole thing with Boston College this offseason is that Phil Jurkovic's finally healthy. And of course, they bring back Zay Flowers too. I trust that Boston College's defense will at least be all right because they're going to be well coached. I love Jeff Hafley as a defensive coach, and I think he's done a great job in the 2 years he's been there. I know last year they dealt with injuries and all sorts of stuff. My concern with Boston College is they lost a lot of good pieces on the offensive line, and whether or not Rutgers can actually expose that. I think Boston College just has better players at this point, and I think I would take them, but I'd stay away from the 7 points. I feel comfortable about potentially teasing that down to one or a pick 'em.
I actually kind of like Rutgers, um, in with the +7. Like I think that they did a fairly solid job last year. Kind of again, they lost a lot of games. They went 5-8.
Mm-hmm.
But like they weren't losing how Rutgers normally loses. So that's a success for last season.
Yeah.
And then I thought they got a lot better this year. Their defense was actually pretty good last year in the Big Ten, and they returned a lot of those guys. Um, Defensive line is going to be pretty solid, kind of like what we saw last year. Their secondary is going to be all seniors or redshirt seniors, basically. So I trust their defense. Now, the offense, they brought in a lot of guys. They brought in a bunch of transfers. They lost their left tackle who went to UCLA, but they brought in Willie Tyler, who where did he go? Where did Willie Tyler go? He went to
I'm blanking on it too.
Louisiana Monroe, I believe.
Right.
He's been a few places, dude. He's been to yeah.
He was at Texas.
He was at Texas. Yeah, he's been a few places, but he should be pretty solid. Their whole offensive line is going to be a little bit of a mystery.
Mhm.
A lot of new
A lot
guys.
of transfers there.
Yeah, but they have Aaron Cruikshank back, who
Mhm.
is just a good gadget weapon guy.
Yeah,
Um,
is probably going to be better utilized at Rutgers than he was at Wisconsin.
yeah, they bring in Sean Ryan, transfer from West Virginia. I mean, again, like they just needed guys, like they needed Big Ten caliber players.
Yeah,
Um,
and then Taj Harris from Syracuse, I
yeah,
believe.
and Taj Harris was pretty good
Yeah,
for Syracuse last year. So the offense is going to be rounded out with I think Noah Vedral is going to start. I'm not sure.
yeah.
It could be
I bet
Gavin
he starts
Wimsatt.
originally.
Yeah, I personally think Gavin Wimsatt probably gives you the best chance to win if you're Rutgers, just because you want the ground threat as well, and just
Mhm.
that dynamic presence. But Noah Vedral, I mean, he started last year a lot of games. That's all I'm about to say. He's
Yeah,
fine.
I mean
He's fine.
he's the veteran in that room. So
But yeah, I like Rutgers with plus a 7.5, plus a 7. I think they're gonna keep pretty close. I trust the defense. I think Boston College is gonna get a little bit knocked off guard by how explosive Rutgers can actually be. I mean, they have athletes at the wide receiver position, so yeah, I think I'll stick with Rutgers +7. Let's go on to oh man, there's so many games that have
yeah,
like 22-point spreads. Actually, this one's fairly interesting because it's NC State going to East Carolina. NC State favored by 11.5. What is your thoughts on this?
so this will be my second year betting against East Carolina on the road in the first week. Last year they played I believe it was App State, and they were a 10.5 point dog, and I bet on App State, and App State covered fairly easily. I'm actually on NC State that for this one. It's one of the ones I feel less confident about on the week, but North Carolina State is returning something like 19 starters, I want to say. They're going to have much better quarterback play. Their weapons are going to be much better, and I think they're going to beat them up on the line too. So I and East Carolina wasn't a awful group of five team last year. I believe they went 7-5. Yeah, 7-5, 5-3 in the conference. They're not as bad as they once were a couple years ago, but I just think North Carolina State has the much better players and maybe much better coach as well. So I'll take NC State minus the 11, and this line keeps going up. So
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about this one. I think NC State's a really good football team. I think they're being slightly overranked right now,
I agree.
based on what the landscape of the ACC was last year. But this to me has a little bit of a feeling of like almost like that early season letdown game for some of these teams that ended last season on a really high note.
Hmm.
And to me, it seems like what Iowa State was last year, right? Both
Hmm.
these teams are non-traditional powers who don't recruit at a really, really high level. They had a really good season one year, and then they were expected to do big things the next season. They kind of just fell a little bit short.
Yeah.
And I just get a lot of those vibes from NC State. I don't think that they're as powerful up front on the lines as people make them out to be. I think that's actually a spot where they can struggle a little bit. And again, like I just think that this NC State team is closer to a top 40 caliber than a top 20 caliber.
I have them right around top 20. I think there's this myth going on right now that they're like a playoff contender, which I don't believe one bit. They went 9-3 last year. They went 6-2 in the league. And by the way, that was 6-2 in the conference with beating Clemson. So they're
Yeah.
not going to beat Clemson again. But like I think with the AC with them returning all these players, with the ACC improving, I think 9-3, 8-4 is probably right around where they're going to be again. The two games they lost in the ACC were by a combined 4 points. They also needed to overtime to beat a Clemson team that was playing absolutely terrible. So
Mhm.
it kind of goes both ways with them. I think they'll probably beat up on some less experienced teams, but I don't think they're anything close to the playoff contender that some people will tell you they are.
Yep. Let's go a little bit quicker through some of these early matchups. North Carolina at App State. Really close. Like this line is shrinking right now. It's
Yeah,
UNC minus 1.5.
I'm actually on App State this week. This was the one I'm on. I was on like way before, way before even last week, and last week kind of just justified it because UNC did not look very good last week. The Drake May looked good, but the rest of the team not really. I just think App State is just going to come out and be more prepared. They get the game at home, and I think if what Florida A&M was doing against UNC last week, I struggle to see how App State's not going to do that. Plus, they start App State starting Chase Bryce at quarterback, who has kind of been a couple different spots now, but he once was at Clemson, so he's actually fairly talented. I think this is a good spot for App State.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a lot of the North Carolina game earlier this week, and while
Hmm.
I liked what Drake May did, I was really scared on what I saw in terms of like what they did defensively. Like I thought that they were just way too soft
Hmm.
on the defensive side of the ball. And App State, for those who really follow college football and have watched a lot of App State football, they are like the opposite of a soft team. Like
Yeah,
they will run the ball as long as it takes to score. And I think that poses a real threat to UNC. I was really like impressed with Amarian Hampton, the freshman running back who UNC
hmm,
went out there.
yeah.
He was actually really good. Same with Josh Downs, but again, they have the skill position guys, they have the speed advantage, but I don't think they have the physicality that App State's going to bring. So
Yeah, I
I
mean,
agree with you. I like App State.
skill position guys have really never been the problem ever since Mac Brown got to UNC. But this is an App State team that like they're not going to shy away from beating you up on the line. They almost won at Miami last year. It was a 25-23 game. They beat Coastal Carolina, who has very
Yep.
good line play.
Yep.
So this is gonna be a tough one for UNC. I do think App State's gonna win this.
Now, if we're right and App State wins this, what does this mean for North Carolina and Mac Brown?
If I'm being perfectly honest, I think Mac Brown is this could be his last year anyway. Like
Yeah,
regardless,
he seemed like he was heading that way.
like you got through the Sam Howell era. You had a couple really good recruiting classes. It didn't end up working out. Like this, like this could be it for him. He's really old. It seems like his time may be up.
Yep. Let's go to. Oh, actually, before we go into the bigger matchups, there's one matchup that I want to emphasize that I don't think people are talking about. Arizona going to San Diego State. San Diego
Yeah.
State is -6 points. I'll
Hmm.
start with this one because again, we talked about this on the last After Whistle Pac-12 overview, but I am really big on Arizona this year. I think that they are completely being written off as one of the classic Arizona teams of the past, where they're one of the worst teams in the Power Five level. But don't let that fool you. Arizona has a talented roster this year. I think that Arizona is going to come out looking really good, and San Diego State again is one of those teams that they had a really good season last year, but they also lost a lot of players. The
Hmm.
team was filled with a lot of fifth year, COVID year guys who really made them so hard to beat at the Group of Five level. And then when you look at Arizona, it's kind of the opposite. Like Arizona, a lot of their key contributors are younger players from
Right.
those solid Jed Fish recruiting classes that he's had recently. And listen, I'm excited to see Jaden Delora play. I think he should start, right? He's definitely going to start.
Yeah. Yeah. He is.
Um, I'm super excited for this team. I think that they're going to win, and I think everyone's going to be talking about it the next day of like what can Arizona be in the Pac-12.
Yeah. This is one I'm not specifically betting on, but I do think that people are really underrating Arizona. They're a team that, they kind of got written off last year because they were by far the worst team in the Pac-12. They're not going to be the worst team in the Pac-12 this year. In fact, I'd be pretty surprised if they were worse than Colorado.
They will be better than Colorado. By the way, their win total is at 3 wins. Okay, they can go over 3 wins.
Yeah, I think that they should have a pretty solid passing attack. Jaden Delora is a guy that threw for just under 3,000 yards last year, 23 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. And, they have a solid receiving group too that's led by Jacob Cowling, who's maybe the most underrated receiver in the country. So this is a group that, they're going to be playing transfers, they're going to be playing freshmen, but I also think they're going to be probably better than people will give them credit.
Yep. Okay, let's go to the big boys. I want to spend a little bit more time on these games. Let's start with what I think is one of the more interesting matchups of Week 1. We have Florida against Utah. What are your initial thoughts?
So the 3 point spread is weird because like the way last season ended, like Florida and losing their bowl game to UCF, just having a dreadful year all around, and Utah closing the season by blowing out Oregon twice and then going wire to wire with Ohio State with like running backs playing in the secondary for them. I think that I my pick is Florida. I'm picking Florida to win this game, but if Utah does win this game, which is probably the more likely outcome, it's going to be because they have one of the most veteran coaching staffs in the country, and they're better up front on both sides of the ball, and they're way more prepared. So I think that if Florida wins this game, it's going to be because their offensive line plays really well and they run the ball well, and then Anthony Richardson makes some good plays in key spots.
Yeah, I'm not ready to believe fully in Florida yet. I like what Billy Napier has done. Again, like Dan Mullen did a really nice job,
Yeah.
but there were some flaws within the program as a whole that I think are going to come out a little bit this year. They were not recruiting at an elite level for the last few classes. Billy
No.
Napier hopes to change that, but
Mhm.
I think
Which
Utah's yeah.
that's
But
exactly why Mullen got fired. It had nothing to do with on-field results.
oh, it was 100% why he got fired. I mean, he didn't like to recruit, and that's
Yeah.
reflected in the team they have this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's also I don't know if you remember the kind of like back and forth exchange in press conferences that him and Kirby Smart had
Yeah.
last year, which was just like a really bad look
Oh
for Mullen
yeah.
as a whole. I thought he was a fantastic on-field coach, but you know, being at Florida, playing the competition you do in the SEC, like you need to be able to recruit, and that's also why Brian Harson's probably going to get fired this year.
Yep. I mean, I think Utah. I know I've hyped up Utah so much this year. Um, they're just a really really good football team. To me, they remind me of Michigan from last year.
Yeah,
Um, a team that is just going to and listen, I don't like saying this because it shouldn't be true, but Utah has a better team than Florida. Like they're going in on the road with the better roster. Like they
hmm
have better players than Florida right
yeah,
now.
they do.
And so in that case, you say, okay, Utah's got the guys. Now, what about the coaching? And however good Billy Napier is, he's not going to be as good as Cal Whittingham
That's
and his
very
staff.
true.
And so again, it's hard to go play in the swamp. But Utah is that the team is made for games like this, tough games on the road, that they're just gonna be better than you at everything. They're gonna be better on special teams, they're gonna be better up front, and they're just gonna like win the game the way they're gonna win the game. And
Utah. I hate saying this because like this like almost like shouldn't be the case, but this like Utah can probably slip up in conference and still make the playoff at 12-1 as a conference champion. They can't lose this game
oh no
because
no listen, if you're Utah and you want to make the next step, you can't lose this. Because this is a
if
chance to go on the road, beat an SEC team,
mhm,
and basically show that like you mean business. And I
yeah,
think they can do that.
and like if they do lose this game, like like you're only in, let's say they lose the game and run the table, which like is probably unlikely considering only one team ever has went 10-0 in conference play in a single season. If Utah loses this game, you will have likely just lost to at best the third best team in the SEC East, and you lose to a team that is probably going to get beaten by a team that you're competing with to make the playoff in Georgia.
Yeah.
So this is a must win.
Yep. Let's move on to another matchup. Let's go to Cincinnati, Arkansas,
Here we go.
in Fayetteville. Arkansas -6. I'll start this one off by saying Cincinnati has you guys fooled. You are being like there is I don't know what it is, but someone's out there that's pushing the Cincinnati still elite narrative, and I'm here to say no. Okay.
Like they
um,
might go 9-3 and win American games, but like you look up and down the Arkansas roster and you look up and down the Cincinnati roster, and I took Arkansas in a teaser because I got them down from 6 to a pick 'em, but they're the second half of my pit Arkansas teaser, and but like this could be ugly. Arkansas is a really tough place to play at, and it's going to be rocking on Saturday for a team that, quite frankly, is probably going to be figuring some things out on the fly because Arkansas's offensive line is really good, and they're going to get beat up front. And frankly, Cincinnati doesn't have the secondary that they did last year. So, like, I know that Arkansas lost Traylon Burks, but Jaden Hazelwood, Matt Landers, Warren Thompson, Keatron Jackson's not even starting for this team. Like their weapons might be deeper than they were last year.
yeah, and also from the Cincinnati side, they just lost. Like they lost everyone.
Mm-hmm.
They lost linemen. They lost wide receivers. They lost running back. They lost Jerome Ford, Desmond Ritter, half their secondary. Um, like I hate to say it, but there's almost no one else on this team. Like
Yeah,
these are
no,
all guys who were too deep last year.
they're gonna have to be doing some real soul searching after Saturday.
Listen, dude, if Cincinnati ends up beating Arkansas this week, I am ready for all the hot takes about Luke Fickle going to wherever job he wants. He
Yeah,
deserves
I am
it.
too.
Okay.
I am too. But
But yeah, I Arkansas by 2 touchdowns.
yeah, this one could get ugly.
Yep. Let's go to let's go to Oregon at Georgia. Georgia is a huge favorite, 17 points.
Yeah.
What's
So
I feel like I've seen different things on here. I feel like people have really liked the under, or people have really liked Oregon, and people have really liked Georgia on the points.
so I've heard the things about the under too. I think I'm gonna end up betting Georgia minus 17, and for one reason. Oregon's used to probably beating teams up front on the line play. Like, they killed Ohio State up there last year, and that's how they beat teams in the Pac-12. And as soon as they saw a team in the Pac-12 with just as good line play as them or better line play, they got blown out by Utah twice. So I think Oregon's really solid defensively. I actually like them a ton. I think they're a top 15 team, but this Georgia team, if you can't beat them up front or at least compete with them up front, and don't think Oregon can, this could be an interesting one.
Yeah,
I
Georgia might be better than last year.
I don't know
And
if I would go that far,
I,
but I think I don't know. I've been looking the last like every day, but the 247 college team talent will not come out for some reason, and I'm excited to see when it does because I think Georgia's probably going to be just around this same talent level. The difference is this year I think they're probably a little more inexperienced.
yeah, but like I don't see a step back from the defense.
I see a small one, but
From who?
if you look up and down their defense, like Georgia against the run is going to be insane. Like Jalen Carter will clog up every single gap possible. Nolan Smith should be one of the best edge rushers in the country, and then I really like their secondary with Kelee Ringo, Christopher Smith, Dan Jackson at free safety. You rotate a couple true freshmen in there. Like this team should still be super talented, and then uh, on offense, they have probably a top 5 offensive line in the country, if not top 3, and they have the deepest weapon group of anybody in the country by far. Like they go 5 or 6 deep at receiver, and if they need to, 4 deep at tight end. So, and they have 2 good pass catching backs. I mean, they're going
And
to
I'm
be
telling you,
rotate
I think this team, I think Georgia's better than last year.
they're going to be rotating guys in and out at skill positions, and teams are going to have no idea what's coming at
Dude,
them.
how do you stop Eric Gilbert and Brock Bowers lined up on your safeties? You could have them on at the same time.
You could line up. You could theoretically line up Washington, Bowers, Gilbert, and Delp out there and create mismatches pretty much anywhere.
It's actually absurd.
Like Oscar Delp, I don't know how much you've seen of him, but like
Well,
he would
I know him
he would
because
start for a he would
Michigan was
start for a
recruiting him.
lot of Power Five teams.
Oh no, at the end of the recruiting cycle, he was a top tier tight end prospect.
Yeah, I mean he's ridiculous, and he's their 4th best tight end on the roster.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do like Oregon this year, and I do like Dan Lanning. I think he's gonna do a really solid job there. But this is a game where you're slightly outmatched, and you're
Yeah,
gonna lose by 20 points, and you're just gonna be fine with it.
yeah. People will say that, oh, Dan Lanning knows this team because he was the defensive coordinator at Georgia last year. Like, oh, it is
You can know what plays they're gonna call. I can
Yeah,
sit there coaching Oregon, and I know exactly what play Georgia will call, and I will still lose by 15 points.
yeah. Just because your talent level is so much worse.
They're better. They're better than Oregon. They are
Yeah.
just better.
And like, yeah, I don't want to continuously knock Oregon because I do think they're a really good team, and I have them in the Pac-12 championship this year. But the talent gap in this game is going to be on full display.
Okay, let's go to the big boy.
Mhm.
Ohio State playing Notre Dame. I'm so excited for this game. And I was thinking the other day, so I was trying to say like, okay, from a fan perspective, as a Michigan fan, like who do I want to win this game?
Mhm.
And I couldn't find an answer because uh, like if Ohio State wins, right, then it's like, okay, like Ohio State is they don't have the excuse from last year that it was just a bad defense from last
Yeah,
year.
rebuilding year.
Yeah, you can't have two rebuilding years in a row, but um, but if Notre Dame wins, it's like, okay, like I really don't like Notre Dame either, but at least they beat Ohio State. That was just my little thought process, but I'm so excited for this game. I think Ohio State, I don't think it's going to be very close, but I think the first half is going to say a lot about the direction these two programs are in.
Yeah. So just like thinking this over, so Ohio State obviously like they bring in like they have a bunch of new starters on defense, which I think alone should make them just better. And they have all these shiny toys, but I think their probably best addition in the offseason was their defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, who they brought in from Oklahoma State. However, if you expect that this Ohio State defense is just going to play to the caliber that Oklahoma State was playing at last year on defense, you're probably going to be wrong because when you bring in these high profile coordinators who, like, granted, are really good coaches, it takes a while to adjust to the new system. You are a Michigan fan. You saw this a couple years ago with Josh Gaddis. So if you think this Ohio State defense is just going to be one of the top 5 defenses in the country right away, like I don't think you're correct on that. They're talented, sure, but I think in the first half Notre Dame could maybe expose them a little bit.
Yeah, and listen, the Jim Knowles thing is really interesting because do you know how long it took Jim Knowles to get the Oklahoma State defense to do what he wanted last year?
A
It took
long
like
time.
a few years to actually get him playing at like a top even 20 level.
Yeah, a few
And last
years
year,
and newer players.
yeah, and I don't. Jim Knowles' defense is a special type because it's an ultra aggressive, um, like 5 defensive back system. So you already run into some problems if you don't have the personnel. If you don't have defensive backs who are going to be able to fly in the run game and eat up blocks and also make tackles in the backfield, then you're going to have a problem because you're going to get run all over.
Yeah,
And
I think Ohio State's pretty deep on the defensive line. Those last couple recruiting classes have shown that. I expect CJ Hicks, the freshman linebacker, to play a lot actually, because some of these guys on defense just like were not that good last year. So
yeah, their
I expect
linebacker
yeah,
play was pretty terrible last year.
yeah,
I
and
think that will be a lot better.
I know that Steel Chambers was kind of new to the position last year because he moved positions, and then Tommy Eichenberg as well. But yeah, that linebacker play needs to be fixed fast. And when you bring in the number 1 linebacker in the country, that probably will help the cause.
Yeah, and I don't know if push back on me if you disagree, but I actually don't think that Ohio State's secondary is up to the caliber that they usually have either. Like I think last year and this year, I mean they have Denzel Burke who was really good a few
Yeah.
years ago, but
Mhm.
like I mean Ronnie Hickman's a really talented player, but like we saw him last year against Oregon and Michigan, like he was I mean he was getting moved around, like he just wasn't playing up to that caliber that we normally see from Ohio State.
Yeah, I think Denzel Burke is a really good player, and granted, still young. I think Hickman's all right. Haven't been too impressed by Josh Proctor the last couple years, and then Cam Brown, I think, is just okay. Like, I think one of the problems with this defense is, or at least the secondary, I should say, is like in 2019 when their secondary was maybe the best in the country. They were just so deep, like they rotated guys in and out. Your 3 corners were Okuda, Arnett. You were playing Sean Wayne in the slot. So I don't think this Ohio State defense is quite as deep in the secondary as it would like to be. And I think there are going to be some games where maybe not in the regular season, but when you get into the playoff and you're playing a team like Georgia or a team like Alabama, and those guys are spreading out 4-5 wide, and you can't line up against that. I think that's where they probably get exposed.
Yeah. And then just to go Ohio State from the offensive perspective, I don't think they're going to take a step back at all.
No, I think they're going to be unbelievable.
They're going to be really good. The one weakness that they had last year was just taking sacks and pressure, and
Mhm.
that could still be an issue. Even though Paris Johnson and DeJuan Jones get really high draft grades, they still struggled at times last year. So we'll
Yeah,
see
I
if
mean
that's
this
been improved.
this has the potential to be maybe the best Ohio State offensive line in years, but
Mm.
we'll see. It's all on paper right now, but even then, they're so
Yeah,
deep at receiver, and they're going to score a ton of points.
yeah. Now they're going to be really good. And now talking about Notre Dame side, I kind of went back and forth on Notre Dame
Mhm.
because I think that they have a good team, but there's something missing when I rewatched a lot of their games last year, and I
Yeah,
know like I get different coaching staff. I focused on the Notre Dame Oklahoma State game because that was Notre Dame Marcus Freeman against Jim Knowles, right?
yeah. Mhm.
And what I saw didn't didn't give me hope for what this game could be
Mhm.
because Notre Dame was not running the ball like Notre Dame usually does. And Notre Dame was relying really, really heavily on Matthew Meyer, who's again he's back and he's going to be probably second best tight end in the country. He's going to be
Yeah,
incredible. But beyond that, um, I was really whelmed by the wide receiver talent they had. They bring back Lorenzo Styles, who should be solid. But they have, I mean, looking at the wide receiver core is like they're starting a few sophomores, really young group.
yeah.
Just
Avery Davis has just been all right for a couple
yeah,
years now.
yeah, and Jarrett Patterson, I believe, got injured early
Mhm.
in the camp. So like he's one of the best offensive linemen, interior offensive linemen in the country. And
Yeah, I
then,
mean, if Notre Dame stays in this game, it's going to be because their offensive line's playing really well and they're moving the ball on the ground. But even then, like I don't think Chris Tyree is as good as a couple of the past running backs that Notre Dame's had.
yeah, and then Tyler Buckner, we haven't seen much from him. We saw a little bit. I'm really not sure.
Yeah,
This is
I'm
this
not
is
either.
interesting. This is interesting because you see what he's made out of in this game. Even if you lose, you can still lose in a way that makes you confident in the future.
Yeah, and
Buckner shows up.
like Notre Dame has never really been a program, at least under Brian Kelly, that's had these like super ultra talented quarterbacks. And like having a game manager at quarterback and running the ball really effectively and playing unbelievable defense, like could work against a lot of teams. And I think that the style of play that they will use is going to work against a lot of teams. But I don't think it's going to work against the Ohio State team that'll just on offense get the ball to playmakers in space and go at it.
Yeah, I've got Ohio State winning by a lot, but I still think even if they win by a lot, I'm really just curious to see how these teams look and how
Yeah,
players step up.
yeah. I think this is a 3 touchdown game.
Okay, that's there you have it. That's gonna wrap up our week 1 picks. Again, thanks for coming on, Jonathan. This
Of
was
course.
a ton of fun. We might have to make this a weekly thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I
Usually won't
know,
have to do it this early with the Thursday games too.
yeah, we'll probably be able to actually create like a normal plan. But
Mhm. Yeah.
this was a ton of fun. I'm super excited for the games this week. Uh, Once again, see you guys later next week and go blue.